emphasis on learning. Here in FEU, we stand for future-ready learning. For continued education, not just for our students, but also for ourselves. Because by learning more about our students, we learn how to be better educators. For educational innovations. Because better, more responsive teaching techniques that put emphasis on learning instead of just passing help our students be better prepared for the future. For turning knowledge into wisdom, not just accumulating it, so we can fulfill the potential of every student to be a future leader, and not just an achiever. We are FEU, and we stand for a future-ready generation. We stand for future-ready learning.
Okay, good afternoon. Time check. It's 12:50. We have a few minutes before we officially start this session. We have noted that there are some questions or issues regarding your access to Moodle. Please make sure that you check in your inbox, in your respective email. Check the spam folder. It might have fallen or gotten into the spam. Okay, that's number one. Number two, the rest of you have not received for some reason you had problems signing in for your attendance. Please try once again to refresh your computers. Maybe there's just some problem with internet connection, so please do so. Otherwise, please get in touch with Miss Chini or Miss Pipay Quinones. But be reminded once again that the attendance sheets are only open up for a period of time. So please make sure you are on board. Later this afternoon, we will again show you a couple of things. One, with regards again the attendance for this afternoon, and number two are your links to the evaluation and all the other materials that you may probably get access to. Reminder once again for those signing in for this afternoon that you must register your names in the attendance sheet. Otherwise, we cannot provide you any certificates of participation. Likewise, we cannot provide you with copies of the learning materials. Now, with regards to Moodle, we may have sent a couple of all these the applications to several participants who did indicate that their interest in joining the project. But unfortunately, upon checking the attendance, only a few were able to go on board. Therefore, don't worry. Those who were with us on board gets the Moodle plus the learning materials. We will be sending you links much later on, including some of the exercises. So time check, it's 12:52. Allow me to at this time to just acknowledge a few more things. We're of course, we have attendance all the way from Mindanao. We had a few from Sulu. I can see here General Santos and Marawi. Assalamualaikum. And hopefully the videos that you have seen earlier gives you an idea about the supplementary videos that the Far Eastern University produces. That way we can use this for classroom discussions. So I am relating these videos to what Sir Arya Kapati earlier mentioned this morning, that some of the activities that you can engage your students in are some videos that you yourselves can produce. Those videos were produced for the general education courses. The first one on Dr. Maharlagmay has got to do with science, technology, and society. And I hope for some of you who may have seen it, hopefully you get an idea of the importance of getting your local government prepared, knowledgeable about the hazard maps, not only the hazard maps, but even getting access to the probabilistic maps, because that will tell you of the possibility of calamities that may happen, and so you can avert it. No? You know where to situate your schools, the markets, or very important establishments, and especially your home, so you know that you are away from danger's reach. And also the other video that we presented of Oliver Brioso, these are orientation materials which we show to our first year students so they know what is in store for them at Far Eastern University. We're very lucky that the school has invested a lot on instructional videos, educational, our educational technology. It's a huge investment, but thankfully it's paying off because of COVID-19. I'd say we have the technological support, and we would like to thank, of course, the Institute of Education for providing the teachers the training to allow us to go on board and how we could make ourselves available to the students far, because most of them are, even we were surprised, some of the teachers were saying they have students who are living even somewhere in Mindanao. So apparently they were caught in a lockdown, they were stranded, but still somehow they were able to enroll and they can access our classes. So the videos, I mean, the presentations of our resource persons for the whole project had given us an overview of what strategies we can employ so that we can be varied, it can be more engaging. More so for us of those in the teaching in the professional courses, we are not education majors, so we don't know those other strategies. So the videos, the PowerPoints that they've shared, and the trainings that we had before the start of the semester were able to equip us with more knowledge, especially from the professional courses, on how we can be more relevant at this time and how we can further deliver. Time check, it's 12:56. In a few minutes, we will start. You may, if you wish to raise any issue before we officially start, please use the question and answer section there. So I'll just acknowledge while we're still on. We're not yet officially on. Great Gismundo from Pangasinan State University, from Wilmer Benito from Ibahay Aklan State University, Ibahay Campus, Joy Guevara as well. Okay. She's raising a problem pertaining to her internet connectivity and that she was not able to get her CIB. So hopefully this will be addressed by Ms. Chini later on. And then Mario Regino Norbe, again, please check your not spam inboxes. It might have landed there, or the question was, is it going to be an application which the school will provide, or will it be individually accessed? So this is, you'll have to refer to your school. And then the question of Rizel Bediga of Hercor College, he was asking if he will be provided links so that he can practice, and then which one is going to get back to you, okay? So he said this will be referred to other individuals. So, okay, time check, it's 12:57. In just a matter of 3 minutes, we'll be going on live again. So, okay, according to Richmond, the sample CIB is now uploaded in your respective Moodle accounts. Please check the courses. So thank you, Sir Richmond. He joins us this time again, no longer as the person that you saw on cam, off cam. He's taking over Oliver Brioso. Okay, from Pangasinan State University, Sheila Marie Ocares greets everyone. Good afternoon. Okay, from Cavite State College, Joan Fortuna. John Christian Bisagas from SLSU, it's a Southern Luzon State University. Michael Angelo Ranosa from LPT ACLC. From CBSU Cavite, good afternoon. From Telomina Purificacion. From PUP Manila, actually he was the first to go on live this afternoon, Julius Cancino. And from Labo, Camarines Norte State College, Christian Mark Balantes. Good afternoon. Mayang hapon sad kanimo diha, Jovelyn Abelia, no? Gikan sa Cebu Technological University. And then from Davao del Norte State College, Leo Rayon. Mayang hapon. Jill Angeles from Southeast Asian College. Mark Vincent Manlangi, Taguig City University. Precious S. De Castro from Gordon College, Olongapo. And Iris Bernardo, Rowena Bernardo from PUP Manila. Okay, time check. It's just a few seconds before we go. It becomes 3 o'clock. So I'd rather open this officially now. Welcome once again, everyone, to the afternoon session of the Faculty Training for Wired Flexible Learning, an HIEd project, Bayanihan project. Okay, and so this morning you heard from Ariel Capate and Richmond Lim as they shared with you how to go online, what resources you may have so that you can engage your students, not only in submitting assignments, but how you can engage them in imparting your, involving them in your discussion. So this afternoon, we will move on to something more serious now. It's the grading, all right? It's assessing and grading online. So allow me now to introduce our speaker. Okay, he's been instrumental. This is the whole project is his brainchild, along with it's a partnership with the Educational Technology, Ms. Kathy Katamora. So both of them have thought of bringing to you the whole module. So we're very honored that this afternoon he will join us in explaining to us or sharing with us his expertise. Our presenter is an associate professor and dean of the Institute of Education, and he was formerly the director of the Office of Education Technology of the Far Eastern University. He holds a PhD in curriculum studies from Taylor's University in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. He had a master's degree in education, a major in curriculum and instruction, and a bachelor's degree in mathematics, both from Far Eastern University. He had received several citations for his publications, and in 2014, he was awarded for outstanding contribution in education, which was given by the World Education Congress in India. Recently, he received the Education Leadership Award in the 7th Asia's Education Excellence Award held in Singapore. He also has a very active involvement in the community. He participates in various advocacies, among them in 2006, and he was awarded for this. He was one of the 10 Bayer Young Environmental Envoys of the Philippines. Spanning number of years in teaching and being an administrator, he has been invited to several conferences and trainings in Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, Australia, and of course here in our own country. His research interests include history of curriculum reforms, sociology in education, and curriculum theories. Friends, please welcome Dr. Harold Kolala, the Dean of the Institute of Education. Sir Harold, it's your turn.
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Hello. Thank you very much, Ma'am Liz. Thank you very much. If you can just give me maybe 3 more minutes, Ma'am Liz, pwede ba? If that's possible. There's just a person in my door. These are
all right, okay.
About
okay,
online.
no problem, sir. Okay, I'll take the time. Okay, all right. Okay, let me instead read a few more things. Maybe let's use, unless you have other concerns, you can type it in the Q&A and we'll try to give it some attention. All right, let me see. What do we have? Okay, si Tinaira Manguranda. Okay, gandang hapon po sa lahat. Who else are around? Okay, si Joy Guevara is asking for the sample, reminding us for the sample of the CIB. Jose Gallego, CPSU Kabangkalan. Good afternoon to all. Saidami Magulong from Cotabato City State Polytechnic College. Maayong hapon. Si Kaika, Cotabato, maayong hapon kanimo, sir. Okay, and then from Taguig City, si Leo Maniulit. Hello, meron po din pang Moodle sa Google Play Store. I will have Richmond respond to that. No? Sorry, hindi ako ganun ka-techy po. Si Richmond po yun, sila Oliver, si Miss Cathy, yun po yung turf nila. Sa production po ako. Okay, so you will find out. From Taguig City University, from Delisa Ferrer. From MSU Main Campus, Vera Vanessa Lastimosa. I hope, Vera, you saw the video we had with Samira Guto, because that tells us of what has happened in Marawi, and hopefully it fosters better understanding of the issues of the people in Mindanao. So we don't have stereotypes that, you know, that the Muslims are terrorists, Muslims are troublemakers. So I hope the video of Samira Guto roots, the context of the problems in Mindanao, and tells us also that they really need our help. Give them the chance to govern themselves, run things based on their culture and perhaps even religion. But at least we get to be more inclusive. So that was her message. Okay, from Don Mariano, also Mariano State University, we also have them. Okay, greetings, good afternoon. Sir Harold, if you're okay, you just give me a cue.
Okay, ma'am, I think I'm ready.
All right,
I just
I'll
want to
turn you over.
if you can see my slide.
Yes, sir, just kindly show it, slideshow na po.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, Ma'am Liz.
You're most welcome, sir. It's your turn. Thank you so much.
Okay, let me greet everyone. Very good afternoon. I hope everyone is safe and well. Um, I would like to say thank you to the team who have put this together, led by, of course, Dr. Mayet Rivera, Dr. Chini Aparicio, Joseph Intalan, Leo Cabanza, Richmond Lim, and the rest of the IE team and EdTech team for putting this together. And um, I'm very happy to present to you. In a way, it's a continuation of a presentation of Ariel this morning. He presented facilitation techniques in online learning that revolves around how do we facilitate declarative knowledge, functioning knowledge, but this hopefully to tie it up and help us into understanding it clearly. Because on the first day, Joseph have presented to you the background on online learning, context, and then the next day was Angela De Leon's presentation on course expected learning outcomes. And in the afternoon of that, the presentation of writing the course information booklet, all of these things. And there were quite a number of you asking about how do we assess this, how do we evaluate this, because I've been um, uh, tuning in since day one, and hopefully I can be able to shed a little bit of light about assessment strategies for online learning and how do we do this in FEU. Again, magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. Before I would like to start today, I want to present to you the agenda for my talk. There are 4 parts of this presentation, and the first 2 will be connected, and then the last 2 will be connected as well. So I'll talk about assessment, evaluation, and grading principles. I think it's best to start there. Tayo po mga teachers, we are very much aware that if we're starting to talk about maybe a strategy or a development of something, we start with the principle because this is in a way, our strong fort to move further. So this is what Ariel was saying about declarative knowledge. Now we have to begin with setting the context and understanding the principle. And then we'll move to the context of online learning. How is this really different from a face-to-face instruction? Or are there really any difference in terms of assessing on a face-to-face versus online learning assessments? And then lastly, I have prepared some essential questions to ask about learning and assessment, which I think it's important for you to ask yourself as well, because you know better you know better in your class, you know the content, you know the skills being developed. In fact, you're the one writing the CELO or the course expected learning outcome. So there, I'm going to talk about essentially this 4, and hopefully to shed light on how assessment is important now more than ever in the aspects of online learning. I hope you're ready and you're excited about that. I wish I can see you, but it has been explained to you yesterday and the previous day that we are on a live telecast. And the first day, I think you were more than 200 And then now I think we're reaching also that number. So we're very happy that you're here, you're tuning in, and hopefully that you learned something from today's presentation. So later, Ma'am Liz can also cut in if there are essential questions that we need to answer. Is that okay, Ma'am Liz?
Noted, Dean. I'm monitoring.
Okay, thank you very much. So
Thank you, Pa.
don't be shy to put your questions on the chat box. Our friends from the Institute of Education and EdTech are there waiting for your questions to be answered. And of course, Ma'am Liz is there to help us facilitate the questions. Okay, before anything else, I'd like to have quick questions with you. I have prepared a few questions for you to answer before we start the presentation. I hope that's okay with you. You can either scan this QR code and it will immediately send you to a website. If you have an iPhone, you can just use your camera. It will automatically scan this. If you're using Android and if you have QR reader, you can just scan it. But if you don't have, don't worry. You can just go to this website, slido.com or slido.com, and then you use this code hashtag 43980, and you can see their assessment FEU HIEd Bayanihan. Okay, I'll give you maybe 30 seconds to figure it out. This is the QR code. If you cannot, then no problem. You can just go to this website and then use this code number hashtag 43980 and check or click assessment FEU HIEd Bayanihan. And then you will see this. Okay. Wait. Okay, you will see this. I hope you're here already. Okay, so this is one of the ways that you can do with your class. Now, this is real time. I know Joseph and Angelo yesterday and the other day have presented to you Padlet, Mentimeter, but this one I like it because you have control of this, no? And I'll let you look at it in a while. So let's start. I want to ask, if I move this screen, it will automatically move to your screen. So sabay-sabay po tayo, no? So let's start with this. Okay, here's the question. Kamusta kayo? Okay, so now you're seeing different feeling coming from everyone. So so there are 26 people who have answered now, 27. Let's see how have you kabado ngunit, okay? So let's have another maybe about 1 more minute. So just ask, and I want to know how are you because I cannot see you, I cannot hear you. I want to know kamusta kayo? Nagagalak ba kayo? Okay lang ba? Kabado ngunit hindi ko na tinuloy yan, pero whatever it is, kung kabado kayo ngunit, it's up to you, or meh. So there are 48 people already have logged in and put their answer, and I'm quite ecstatic with your answers. That majority of you are nagagalak, or okay lang, or meh, or kabado. Okay, so let's move to the next. I'm happy that you are excited. Ako po ay nagagalak din. Kami po sa Far Eastern University ay nagagalak din na makasama namin kayo ngayon, lalo na ho ako. Para po sa mga okay lang po ang pakiramdam na okay lang. Wala pong problema sa okay lang. Sa mga kabado, wala rin pong problema. It's very normal to feel the nerves. It's always okay to feel that you are nervous because it's part of being who we are as a human being. Okay lang din yan. Kung sino yung mga so-so, I don't really know what I'm feeling now. And that's certainly okay. All right, so let me move to this question. I have one question here for you. Do you think you will have an adjustment in assessing and evaluating your students this semester? Yes, 100%. Yes, 50%. Yes, a little. No adjustment. So there are 15 people, 16 people have already said yes, 100% and yes, 50%. So we'll put a little bit more time to wait for the rest about what do you feel or what do you think if you will have adjustment in assessing and evaluating your students this semester. Okay, so about 33 of you have answered. Okay, there's about 5% who said a little, and then no, about 2% was saying no adjustment at all. Okay, I'm very willing to listen to those who said that there will be no adjustment. And those who said 100% that there's adjustment, about 68%. So now we're on 58 people who have answered. I'm very excited to know your thoughts about this. So there's, okay, we'll have maybe about 30 more seconds. Okay. So about 69 of you have already logged in, or 73. Yes, 59%, 100% of adjustment. Yes, somewhat about 50%, 32%. Yes, a little, 8%. Oh, nawawala yung no adjustment, naging zero na siya. It's okay to change your mind, no problem. That's why this kind of poll is open. You know, if you change your mind immediately, no problem. It's just something. Okay, so let me move to last one. What form of adjustment do you need to do for this semester? So you can just put a word or a phrase or 2 words. You can just write it here. What form of adjustment do you need? Do you think technical know-how? Okay, bumalik tayo dito. Here. Okay, I'll move to this. All right. What form of adjustment do you need to do for this semester? Maybe you can type a word or 2 words. Okay. Adjustment in technology, I assume. Adjustment to digitalized. Okay. Adjustment in time. Technical, timely feedback. Okay, that's good. Technology is becoming bigger. 6 of you have logged in. There's no right or wrong, as you know. Okay, digitalization. Okay, good. Time, essential. Other people are saying disposition, attitude, a lot. That's good. Paradigm shift, another paradigm shift. Okay. Keep attending webinar. Okay, that's very good. All right, so I'll have another 30 more seconds for you to log in your answer. Some of you are saying going paperless, online strategies, leniency. Okay, that's very good. That's very interesting to know. Application of technology. This is very similar to technology. So the bigger here is technology, application technology, digitalization, attitude, online. Everything. Oh, there's a question mark. That's a question. Sitting down with laptop, I understand. You know, sometimes it's very, very difficult to sit the whole time looking at your laptop, sitting in the right position, and make sure you don't, you know, stress your back. Module making, okay, that's good. From physical to virtual, okay. Okay, transition to online. Okay, maybe about 10 more seconds before I move. Application to technology. Okay. All right. So about 75 of you says technology, digitalization, technical skill. You know, and it's very common nowadays to ask, Am I prepared to do online learning, virtual learning? I'm not techie. And the assumption is that online learning is becoming more technical or moving to digitalization, and make sure that you have technical skills. So these are things that are very valid, and I'm very sure that you feel, some of you or a lot of you have felt this already. And okay, so these are the things that you have form of adjustment. There are some questions and answer here, but I'll reserve that later. Okay, thank you for participating here. Let me go back here. Okay, for some of you who said that you need to have 100% adjustment, and majority of you said the adjustment will have to be technical skills or technology, maybe not on your end, but on the end of our internet providers, you know, whatever technology means to you. And these are very valid um, statements or questions that you want to raise, that you're raising right now. But the question is, when we talk about assessment, because the question was adjustment in your assessment, the question is, if you're adjusting it, you're not, because majority of you have said it's about technology, technical skills, time, etc. Meaning to say, you believe, if I captured it correctly, that assessment, whether in virtual or face-to-face, might not be significantly different. One is just, I look at you in the classroom, I see you in the classroom, I talk to you in the classroom, and the other one is, I talk to you via screen. Okay, let's try to figure that out in a while. I like this literature from Biggs in 2002. This, I think, encapsulates the principles about assessment, evaluation, and grading. For those of you who have background in education, maybe a degree in education, a master's degree in education, and a doctorate in education, maybe you have came across with Biggs. He said in 2002, assessment, evaluation, grading principles. And if you put it together, it's about aligning the learning outcomes and the assessment, meaning to say what you have prepared in your course expected learning outcomes. Therefore, you want to assess whether these expected learning outcomes have been achieved by your students. So that's what it means when Biggs in 2002 said aligning the learning outcomes and the assessment. But what does it really mean to us? That means we should define exactly what our expected learning outcomes are, or the course expected learning outcomes. And yesterday it was explained to us by Sir Angelo that there is about 5 or 6 expected learning outcomes. And we'll talk about that. What is the best way or number of expected learning outcomes for a semester like this coming semester? Biggs also mean choosing teaching and learning activities likely to lead to attaining the learning outcomes. So it's not just about the expected learning outcomes. And mind you, the expected learning outcomes, which I like what the speaker yesterday said, that the expected learning outcomes is not about what you, us as teacher, can do, but it's about what the students can do. And sometimes we take that for granted because we as teachers, we think that it's our responsibility to tell our students what they should learn in your class. And there's nothing wrong. I don't mean that in a negative way. We have been in this teaching paradigm that as teachers, it is your responsibility and duty to tell students that these are what you need to do in my class. But you and I both know that what students want to learn in the class, and when they go out of the university, when they move out of your class, they're not learning in a very linear way. What do I mean by that? They're not learning from what their superiors are just saying. They actually can make a decision about what they want to do in their lives. So if we're moving out of a traditional objectives of what the teacher should do and what the teacher should tell the students to do, we need to take this take this into a consideration. What students would or can do, and what does the student or what do students like to learn? If that's the case, it opens now a difficulty for teacher, because it will no longer be one or directed instruction. No, it will now open to multiple kinds of learning. If you have 40 in a class, if you have 30 in a class, you have 50 in a class, there can probably be 50 different ways of learning. So that's why teachers, and please, I'm saying this in a very scholarly way, so please don't feel bad. We teachers, we have this idea that we should be in full control. In full control meaning even what they need to learn, we have in full control. And culturally, that has been embedded to us in the Philippines, in the context of the Philippines. My PhD dissertation, I looked into the history of curriculum reforms from 1970 to current. It's a long historical dissertation. And do you know that even as early as 70s, our curriculum in basic education have projected already the idea of learner-centered approach and student-centered learning approach. And in the 80s, our basic education curriculum, it's named the NSEC and NESC, or the New Elementary School Curriculum. It's written explicitly that the students are the center of the whole educative process. And that would mean we make our students make a decision of their learning. Unfortunately, even until now, there are a lot of classrooms that we make the decisions for our students. And when we say we exist to teach our students, we still make decisions for them and we don't include them in the decision. So why am I saying this? Because there's a connection on the definition, or how do you define the expected learning outcomes? And that would ultimately have a connection on choosing teaching and learning activities likely to lead to attaining the learning outcomes. Because if you open expected learning outcomes on not just you, then therefore it will open a different kind of teaching and learning activities that you need to give to your students. So if I move to bullet number 3, assessing students' learning outcomes to see how well they match what was intended. If it's controlled, everything is controlled by the teacher, bullet number 3 is very easy. Okay? And then last, what Biggs and his colleagues mean by aligning the learning outcomes and assessment is arriving at the final grade. Okay, let's try to analyze that more. In his article, I'm sorry, and I put a whole block of quote here, but I have read the important words here. In Biggs 2002, on page 6, faculty have been shown to have mixed opinions on the purposes of assessment. So what are these mixed opinions? This is what I was explaining a while ago. There are teachers or faculty who viewed teaching and learning as a transmission of knowledge. That's why if you ask people, if you ask teachers, initially when you say, why do you want to teach? Most of the teachers that I have interviewed, they say, I'd like to transmit my knowledge to them. I would like to share my knowledge to them. I would like to give what I know to them. So this is just one of the schools of thoughts, that teaching and learning as a transmission of knowledge. And we have heard this several times in different forums, in different conferences, in different trainings like this, that we shouldn't be just transmission of knowledge. We have heard that so many times. And what's the difference now on what I'm telling you? No? So we're likely to view assessment as the method to test students' ability to reproduce information, because if you believe that teaching and learning is a transmission of knowledge, it makes sense that the way you measure students' knowledge is to know whether they can reproduce information. No? So you test them. That's what Biggs is saying. One group of faculty are saying, okay, I transmit knowledge. What would be the assessment? The most significant is a pencil and paper type of test. And that makes sense. No? That's why in this kind of training in assessment, the speaker, if you're, I'm sure some of you have already been or have attended assessment seminars, the speaker should be very careful in saying, do not use pencil and paper type of test. No, we shouldn't say, or we should not demonize pencil and paper type of test, because there are mixed opinions about it. If you as the teacher believe that I transmit knowledge, the best way to measure that is to give them tests. Okay. In contrary, those who saw teaching and learning as facilitating critical thinking, viewed assessment as integral part of the learning process for problem analysis and application, then giving them the very basic pencil and paper type of tests, which are content-based, might not be a good way to measure students' critical thinking. So in every assessment seminar that we have been, if the speaker is saying, do not use this, do not use that, maybe the question should be, what do you believe about teaching? And why do you believe what you believe about teaching? For instance, I do recitation in the class. We have been doing recitation for the longest time in history of teaching, as far as we know. There are school of thoughts about why recitation should not be used inside the classroom. Because recitation is just waiting for the answer that the teacher wants to hear from the student. So that whole paradigm of recitation within the idea of transmission of knowledge makes sense. It makes sense. I want you to reproduce what I tell you, so I will ask you. Then recitation will make sense. But if you are moving to a more critical thinking side or critical pedagogy side, then that might not be a good way to assess. HIEd, in his book, and I like this book if you have a chance to read this, his book entitled, forgot the title, but I'll share it with you, it will come to me. In 2009, this book, on page 1, he said, if students' understandings of learning and student performance on assessments are influenced by faculty assessment practices, meaning us, this could have a significant impact on whether or not intended educational outcomes are achieved. And I quote, we implicitly trust our academics, or us, to know what they value in their subjects, to set examinations and assignments, to mark reliably and validly, and then to record these marks. And then students move on upwards and or out. And this structure of educational system that we're trying to understand for a very long time, that students come to university, they follow a set curriculum, we train them so that they can be employed eventually, we test them so that they can be qualified employees in the future, so they can find a good job to support their family. There's nothing wrong about that. Now, if you believe in that paradigm, but for those who believe that the real world, quote unquote, is not linear, that our students need to learn how to solve problems within their society or within their environment or within their constructed environment. Iba pa po yan, ha? Iba pa po yung what they think their environment is and what they think the constructed environment is to them. Okay, iba po yun. So this becomes now a very difficult way to process learning, and how do we make sure that they have achieved that? Hopefully, towards the middle of this presentation, we will try to figure this out. So later, I will share with you the title of John HIEd's book, and I will remember that in a while. Okay, so what are the modes of assessment? And I'm sure you have heard this so many times. There are formative, summative, and diagnostics, and how assessment is being carried out. It can be tutor assessment, meaning you go by one, or you give the students responsibility to assess their own learning, peer or self-assessment, and sometimes online assessment. Yesterday, I was speaking in a conference, and one question raised to me. The question was, what are the challenges that we carry out in terms of student-centered learning or problem-based learning or this kind of learning in online learning instruction? I said there are two main challenges that we are facing. Number one, if you believe in this paradigm of student-centered learning, meaning you make the students the center of the whole educative process and you make sure that you negotiate with them what learning they want, etc., etc., and then you don't fixate on content-heavy instruction, then there are two challenges there. Number one, is that acceptable to the teachers? Because a lot of teachers, and I don't mean to say that this is wrong, but these are essential part of the literature of teaching and learning scholarship, that a lot of teachers, not just only in Philippines, but around the world, believe that content is very important for the students so that when they move out of the university, they can use that content. So this question of whether removing content-heavy instruction, is that acceptable to the teacher? Second, is that acceptable to the students? Because if you try to do student-centered learning, one of the tenets of student-centered learning is not lecturing for 1.5 hours or 2 hours or 3 hours. It's about making students finding a problem, answering the problem, do some research. And if that's the case, and students, particularly in Philippine situation or Philippine context, when we say teaching, the idea is that the teacher is in front, giving information, students listening, student will be tested on that information. So two ways, teachers' acceptance and students' acceptance. And I've heard a lot of complaints coming from students saying, my teacher is not teaching because the teacher is not lecturing. So when we say, how is assessment carried out, it is important that we understand these principles of teaching and learning that I'm sharing with you right now. So just very quickly, as you know, summative assessments in terms of educational use, it's to use for passing and failing students. That's essentially the use of summative assessments. To pass or fail students, to grade or rank students, to select for future courses, to predict success of future courses, to motivate students. Essentially, learning is not within this function. No? Pero in formative assessments, this is to really provide feedback to students, to improve their own learning, to provide a profile of what the students have learned, and to help students to develop their skills of self-assessment, to motivate students possibly through goal setting. So ang laki ng diferensya nila, no? And you know that already. And the other one is diagnostics, just to know whether to find out some predictable difficulties, to diagnose strengths and weaknesses. Here are some of the range of assessment methods that we've been using for quite some time. Unseen exam or closed book exam, essay, short questions, combination of all of this, open book exam, multiple choice question. I am not sure whether you're doing open book exam, but a lot of universities outside the Philippines, they have been using open book exam because they're not asking content. What are they assessing then if they're opening the book? No? And life is like that. It's open book. You know, you can always go to Google. So what kind of assessment that you can really give to your students? Multiple choice questions or MCQ, coursework, assessment like essay, report, project, learning journal. This is becoming famous nowadays. Portfolio assessment. And portfolio assessment is not just only compiling and curating the students' work. You know, there are in-between reflections of those students' work that they should know whether they're progressing or not. It's not you, just you as the teacher to tell whether the students are progressing or not. So presentation and or posters, peer and self-assessment. And I would like at this point, colleagues and friends, I'd like to focus on formative assessment because, as I've explained a while ago, summative assessment does not really mean development of learning. It's about checking what they have learned. So formative assessment is also called assessment for learning or assessment as learning in some literature, and thus the function of this is developmental. And typically, in the literature of teaching and learning scholarship, formative assessments are not graded. But that's very shocking in Philippine situation. Everything that the students will do must be graded. A short quiz of 10 items must be recorded. A recitation must be recorded. A long quiz must be recorded. So, but in the literature of formative assessment, this is developmental. This is the time where they should know that they're wrong, and they should not be penalized if they know that they're wrong. Because the goal of this is to develop their skills towards a particular task or a particular big competency. So here is just the figure of the cycle of formative assessment. Sometimes we evaluate students' progress in the middle of the instruction. We give feedback, and then students will correct the assessment so that they can already develop a sense of progress, and then go back again, evaluation, etc. So it goes around. No? So this is a very simple cycle of formative assessment. But here, you will not see this in summative assessment. Sometimes summative assessment is already the end. And you cannot do anything about it anymore. If the student fails, student fails. But the formative assessment cycle, it's never ending. It goes around. You give feedback to the students. Students will correct it. You will help students to correct it. You evaluate the students' progress so that the students know also whether they're progressing or not. Here are some of the sample alternative assessments that you've been using, we have been using for quite some time. I'd like you to look into it. And it has a connection later on how we can proceed on assessments of online learning. So these are all forms of formative assessment. So assessment done while instruction is ongoing, as I've explained a while ago. On the other hand, we teachers are more comfortable in the concept of assessment as summative. When we say assessment, it's always exam. No? To summarize achievement, to record and report on learning. That's what Harlan says in 2007. But summative, like I've said, sometimes it's the end. You cannot do anything about it. It's not developmental. It's about stopping the students to know and say, this is your grade. I'm sorry, you will not move. You will not continue to the next level. But for formative, we hope that this is something that we expect our students to do, that they develop the skills all throughout, because this is, at the end of the day, it's always good to say, it's good to commit mistakes. There's nothing wrong in committing mistakes. It's up to you how you can be able to learn from that mistakes and see whether if you have progressed from the past mistake. I'm sounding now like it's a life lesson, but it is really true in terms of formative and summative assessment. Just to summarize what I've said, formative assessment, I've prepared you this just to summarize it. In terms of grading, formative is not usually graded. Summative are usually graded, but I don't force formative assessments to not be graded because we have been in this situation for a very long time. When I presented this to FEU faculty to say that formative assessments are not graded, they're also like a big shock. No? My work in FEU is mostly about training before I moved to the Institute of Education. So I have been in the training profession for quite some time. And every time I say formative assessments are not graded, there's always a shock. No? You mean to say if a student will if I give a 10-item quiz to the student, I will not grade it? I said, you decide. But normally, since it's developmental, it shouldn't be graded, because if it's graded, then it's detrimental now to their development. The purpose of formative assessment is to improve, to give feedback. But for assessment, it's to judge, to derive a grade. You see the big difference of this. The focus on the formative assessment is very focused on whether learners have acquired specific skills of information. But for summative, it's less focused on that. Instead, allows learners to demonstrate a range of skills. That's why summative assessment is typically given at the end, because the small tasks that they will learn in your class, hopefully to build in the summative assessment. In terms of effort, requires little time for instructors or learners. Very simple, simply done in the class. But for summative, it takes time. It's normally done outside the class. And it's a little bit complex because we're expecting that students who are taking the summative test or summative assessments have initial skills so that when they develop something, when they create something, those small skills can help them achieve that. This is my favorite line. Black says in 2009, when the cook tastes the soup, that is formative because you can still do something about it. You know, it's still salt. It's not salty, so I'll put a little salt. Oh, it's salty. I'll put a little bit of water. So that's formative assessment. But when the customer have already tasted the soup, that's summative because you cannot do something about it. It's about the customer doing something about what the customer is consuming. So the customer now will say, I like more taste. So I'll put more, I'll put more, yung favorite natin mga Pilipino, Ajinomoto, yung ganyan, things like that. Okay. So at this point, there's a 5-minute task for us. Actually, this 5-minute is just for me to see whether you have or you've been listening to my presentation. There's also a QR code here. If you can scan it, you can scan it, please. But if you don't have, can you go to www.menti.com and type this code. And from here, you will see this. You will see this. What assessment method do you use in class? Okay. You can have multiple entries if you want. So I'll go back here. You can scan if you want, or if you go to www.menti.com and type 6040983. This is just 5 minutes. Okay, so now we're here. I want to see what assessment method do you use in class. Okay, moving quiz. I've experienced moving quiz in my biology classes. You know, I think the teacher who wrote this is a science teacher. Okay, can you please detail it? What kind of formative, what kind of summative that you have been using in your class? You know, the good thing about this kind of apps, this can replace the typical question and answer in the class, no? Especially if you have a big crowd like you, no? Like this, we have a big crowd. So we want to know, I want to know personally, what assessment method do you use in your class, or what types of assessment do you use in class? Some of you are saying formative, moving quiz, filling up concept maps, okay. Reflective essay, that's good. Role play, multiple choice question or MCQ. Quiz, can you please detail it? For when you say formative, what kind of formative, please? Can you please detail it? Okay. Games, discussion, journal writing, case study. Okay. Paper and pencil test, performance-based. Glad to read that. Problem solving. Essay is now becoming bigger, as well as the performance-based. Okay. It's steady, essay, performance-based, problem solving. It's quite steady. Critic paper, a little bit. Journal writing. Portfolio, some of you have said portfolio. Socratic method, I've seen Socratic method. Okay, quiz is kind of steady, as well as essay, case study, performance-based. Okay, one more minute and we'll try to move to the next. Okay, ang steady natin ay observations, essay, case study, problem solving, quiz, journal writing, a little bit of formative assessment, performance-based, but we still need to detail what that formative assessment is. Return demonstration, maybe some of you are in nursing or in physical education. I'm seeing critique paper and case study. Okay, so if you're trying to look at this, it's quite common among you saying that you've been doing essay, you're doing observation, doing case studies, problem-based and problem-solving based reflective essay, and very few MCQ, a little bit of quizzes, learning journal. Okay, this is good. This is good that we are seeing that there are very few of you are saying I'm doing a pencil and paper type of test. Okay, a lot of you have said essay and observations and case study. Okay, so thank you for answering. Why did I ask this? Because, okay, so we're very active here. Huh? A lot of people are still answering. Okay, project base is now the biggest. Huh? I will go back later to this, and I want you to think about this. No? What assessment method do you use in class? And based from what you said, project-based is the most commonly used, journal writing, essay, case study, observation, performance-based. Okay, so this is good news, no? Why it's good news? Because in assessment in general, it's good news that a lot of you are doing performance-based assessment rather than just content-heavy assessment. And if that's true in your class, who am I to doubt it? But if that's true in your class, there are still some common problems with assessment. And I have been teaching assessment for quite some time since I started teaching in the university. Here are some of the common problems with assessment. The assessment's tasks do not match the stated learning outcomes. Now, the question that I posted a while ago, what assessment method that we have done? So if you're saying problem-based or what was that? Project-based, case study. Okay. If you're saying that, the first question is it matched to your stated learning outcomes? Okay. You should be able to answer that question by your own. No? Second, the marking criteria do not match the task or outcomes. If you're doing a problem-based learning, sometimes the way to check it or the way to mark it, sometimes it does not match the learning outcome stated. Or the criteria are not known to students. Medyo guilty po tayo lahat dito, no? Sa criteria are not known to students. We still are in the assumption that they should not know how they should be graded. We're still at that assumption. But I'm not saying all. But there are a lot of students, and in a student-centered learning environment, they should know what are the set of criteria before they start doing the assessment. When you participate in a singing contest, you know already what they're looking for because they will say, okay, here are the criteria for judging in a singing contest. If you join a drawing contest, if you join a drawing contest, they will tell you, we want to see a socially relevant drawing. So that's a straight to the point criteria. So they should know what are the criteria before they can even start to write an essay. If you say, okay, you need to write a 1,000-word essay, 1,000 words, I will not mark the wrong grammar. I will not check the grammar, but I will correct it. I will not grade it. Or you say, it is important for me that grammar is correct, so therefore I will reduce or deduct 0.5 from the point for every grammar error. So why are you doing that? That's the next question. So it has to be known. You need to tell the students what the criteria are before they even start the assessment. Students do not understand the criteria, as mentioned. Insufficient time for faculty to mark in assignments or examinations. If you give an essay, expect the time. No? Expect the time for you to mark the essay. You know, essay is not. It's a very difficult type of assessment because it's difficult to maintain a specific standard. Have you seen a teacher sometimes when you're studying, no? Or maybe when you're in your early years of teaching, you have marked first essay, you say, okay, this is a very good one. I put 95 as the grade of that essay. And then the second paper, ay, mas magaling siya dun sa nauna. But I cannot give 98. This is a 95 paper, so I'll say 95. Buburahin ko yung nauna, from 95, gagawin kong 94. So yung third, ay, mas magaling to. So, binubura ko na naman yung previous. So that's what, in assessing of essay, yung tinatawag nating grade backlash, no? So bumababa ng bumababa because you cannot maintain one set of criteria or one set standard. Absence of well-defined criteria, as mentioned, unduly specific criteria, which create a straitjacket for students and make marking burdensome for faculty, meaning you're so strict with the specific criteria that students' creativity can no longer come out. Inadequate or superficial feedback provided to students. Wide variations in marking between modules and assessors or within assessors. And this is very true to a class that being one course or one subject na tinuturo ng ibang teacher. Let's say you're section 1, your colleague is section 2, and then the students know, si teacher 1 in this class, hindi yan nagbabasa ng essay, mabilis magbigay ng grade. Ako ay laging A in this class. So yung teacher medyo masungit yan, I will not enroll there. Although you have the same subject, expected standards, same standards, the students know who is very lenient in terms of giving grades or marking essays for that matter. Variations in assessment demands of different modules. This time, kulang tayo sa variations. Mostly ang ginagawa ngayon are make a vlog. Kasi since online students now, medyo sawang-sawa na po sila in making a vlog, making a video about something and then post it in YouTube. Ask your friends to like it. The more like, the higher the grades that you will get. The question is, why are you doing that? Yeah? So maybe we should ask ourselves about that, this kind of assessments that we give. Lack of programmatic assessment, meaning it's an afterthought. You say, I think I like to give this to my students. But assessment, whether it's online or face-to-face, it has to be planned, and it's not. It's important that it's not an afterthought. You know, so you need to have a programmatic assessment. Now, if you have, Ma'am Liz, do you think should we answer some questions before I move to the context of online learning?
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Among the first question here is, if quizzes will not be graded, I don't think the students will take it seriously. How can we possibly address this?
That's a very good question. That's a very good question because the perspective of the student will say, it's not graded, so I will not do it. So you know already the intention of the student, to get a grade, to finish your class so that I can move to the next year level, you know, just for the sake of passing the class. So it already gives you the intention of the students. Now, if you start the semester by saying, this is the development of competency, and the Commission of Higher Education have already stated in so many HIEd memorandum orders that we're outcomes-based, for competency development or competency-based learning. This is now a backlash on the idea of grading formative assessments. So, ito yung sinasabi ko po sa inyo kanina. This is a challenge not just only for teachers, whether it's acceptable to teachers. The next is it acceptable to students? And this question have been raised to me so many times. And my answer is always, now you know what the intention of the student is, just to get the grade and not to learn in your class. You know, that's very essential. So what do you need to do now? It's always level of expectation on day one. When you start the class on day one, and I don't know whether you're already starting in your respective schools and colleges or universities, day one is very important. Setting of expectations and telling them that this class is the development of your skills so that it can help you to be successful in your upper class year or even if after your college. So that one is framing it. No? The key word here is, how do you frame that to your students? And I like that question, and I know that it's always going to come out. No? In my experience, what I do is I mark the essay, or I give them the assessment. And sometimes on the first assessment, I don't tell them that it's not recorded. I give it to them. I always tell them, okay, look, if I will record this, you will fail here. But it's not the point. The point is, look at your sentences here. It's not cohering. You know, I'm not teaching English, but I'm also very particular when they write an essay. No? So I always tell them, look at the sentences. It's not cohering. What do you mean by this? Don't you want to learn how to write in a cohering manner? Don't you want to write in a good way? Not necessarily in English. Because if I ask students also, you know, I ask students also to write in Filipino in my class. I give them a choice. It's up to you. I'm not an English teacher, so I have that luxury to say that you can write an essay whatever you want to write an essay in terms of language. So this is now becoming of you, how creative you are in framing this. But if you keep saying that you need to pass this class, you know, you need to get this mark so that you can pass this class so that you can move to second year or third year. You're third year ready. If you're graduating, you need to get this. If you frame that, and most of the times it comes from the teacher. That's why students are very particular in the grade, because it comes from us. You know, we have perpetuated the idea of grading for a very long time. So students now are saying, I need to get a grade. I need to get a good grade so that I can pass. So the proper answer to your question is, how will you now frame this to your students? That it's really about understanding and developing the skills towards becoming successful in their studies or towards becoming successful after their studies in your respective schools. So yeah, I hope I answered that question.
All right, here's another one from Neil of Philippine Women's University. What kind of rubric will be used when grading the oral report of students? Analytic or holistic?
Okay, that's a very directed question about developing rubrics. There are a lot of literature saying that holistic rubrics instead of analytic is good, because at the age of interdisciplinarity, at the age of making sure that they're developing different competencies, holistic kind of rubric is a good way to use it. But not to say that analytic kind of rubric is not effective. In fact, the use of analytic rubric is directed to a particular expected learning outcome. Okay, if your expected learning outcome will help you in achieving that particular expected learning outcome, and analytic kind of type of rubric can help you, then sure, that's something that you can do. Similar to my answer to the question, you know, you have been saying about student-centered learning, that would mean standardized testing in terms of content is no longer important. I'm saying yes, in the context of student-centered learning, that content type of learning is, or content type of teaching is no longer relevant or no longer within the pinnacle of learning or teaching. But if you believe that this class, they need to know this, they need to know the definition of photosynthesis, and they need to know this exact definition of photosynthesis, and then the best way to know that is to ask them in an objective type of test. So like I've said, I'm not demonizing one because that I subscribe in student-centered learning. What I'm trying to say here is that you need to understand also what you believe about teaching, which I said a while ago. And why do you believe about teaching? If you ask your students to do recitation in the class, hopefully you believe that that way of assessment can help you achieve your expected learning outcome.
All right, this one from Cotabato City State Polytechnic College from Saidamin, Bagolong. How often should we give formative assessments? And when is the right time to give summative assessment?
Thank you for that question. That's typical in terms of the number. No, let me just put that into context. No? It's not about the timing, and sometimes this question always comes out in terms of the number. How many formative assessment? How many summative assessment? And if you're asking about that, the summative assessment is given towards the end of every instructional segment. An instructional segment can be a chapter, an instructional segment can be a unit, an instructional segment can be a period. So if you're ending, if you're, let's say in your calendar, this is the end of your instructional segment, then you can actually do that. But be very careful in that, because if you follow a particular syllabus that is close to a schedule, then you will now be within this kind of problem of making sure you finish this because the schedule is coming out. It's because the schedule is coming out. No, it's not wrong. Again, I'm very careful because there's a lot of universities and colleges that they follow strictly their schedule. I'm not saying that's wrong. But if you're going to put that in the context of student-centered learning, the schedule or the time is always the warden to learning. Time is a warden to learning. They actually stop students to learn, comprehend more, because the teacher is making sure that they need to finish the syllabus on time, because they will be checked by their supervisors or by their principals or by their deans na midterm na, nasa chapter 2 ka pa din. Diba? So that's why I'm very careful, because I know that there are different contexts. I know that there are different dynamics in different schools. But let me just put this in this context. Formative assessments are being given because you want to know and you want to verify whether small skills are being developed during your instruction. Instruction is not just only lecturing. Instruction can be focus group, it can be research-based, it can be inquiry-based, it can be discovery-based. So whatever strategy that you want to use. Now, giving formative assessment, and if you think within your feedback, I have a slide here about feedback. In your feedbacking, if you feel that students are now achieving that specific expected learning skill or expected learning outcome, then that signals you for a bigger assessment. And the bigger assessment is normally the summative assessment. What I do personally is that I begin with the end in mind, as they always say. That's not coming from me, it came from someone. That before the start of the semester, I always say, okay, the output of this class is a 5,000 word reflective essay. Okay? That's the output of this class for the whole 5 months in a semester. So now I'm looking at that as my output. How can I now make sure that the students develop the skills in writing a reflective essay, so that when they submit towards the end of the semester a 5,000 word reflective essay, they can be able to do it. Writing is not just only the syntaxes, it's not just only about the grammar, it's about the content and how they communicate their thoughts about it. So in other words, I prepare for that. We prepare strategies, I prepare strategies for my students, so that when they develop or when they do their 5,000 word reflective essay, they are equipped with the skills in writing that essay. So that means I will start backwards. No? Begin with the end in mind. This is the final output of this class because it's an important task for students to write a 5,000 reflective essay because I'm teaching education students. So from that, work backwards. What are the assessments, small formative assessments that can help me to achieve that? So in other words, it's really knowing what final assessment, summative assessment are going to give to your students so that you can prepare that formative assessments. And I tell you, at this age of pandemic that we're doing formal online learning, the more that we need the teacher supervision and the more that we need the teacher to engineer the whole semester in a way that you have planned it well, so that it's not going to be an afterthought for you. So I hope I answered that question. Yes.
Okay, let's entertain two more questions, and I think she needs your counsel. She's handling anatomy, and the subject is highly technical. What would be the best assessment?
Okay, this is a classic issue about board exam kind of classes. If I assume this class can be a nursing class or a medtech class or basta may licensure examination. I have heard questions about if we move to student-centered learning and if we will not give them assessments that are highly content-based, they may not be able to answer the board exam. They may be able to, they will probably fail the board exam. Now, the question here is, are we training our students, or are we teaching our students just to pass the board exam? Okay, because the way I look at it, if you say that this is content heavy and they need to learn this content, I will go back to the origin of problem-based learning. In the 1970s, this university, a medical university, when of course they're training medical doctors, future medical doctors, they began to say memorizing this information is no longer helpful to our medical doctors. They need to have critical thinking, problem-solving skills, creative thinking, so that when they are in the field, they can be able to consume knowledge, whatever knowledge that they want to consume. That was the theme in the 70s in this particular medical school. Then it have evolved into question of, now, if the students are no longer memorizing information to prepare for the test, what now can we give, or what now can we train our students so that when they sit on a test, because certainly they will sit on a test, maybe a licensure exam or whatever kind of test, what skill that they need to have so that they can pass a particular test? My answer is always like this. In terms of sitting in the test, hopefully when you train our students, it's not just only to pass the test. If they develop critical thinking, creative thinking, problem-solving skills, memorizing it is not a problem to them. But if you train them just to memorize the content, then they cannot be able to address higher order thinking. Yan yung sinasabi ni Bloom's taxonomy, that there's lots and HOTS, or lower order thinking skills. Because if you target HOTS, according to him, then students will be able to easily answer questions that are memorization in nature, or ang tawag nila ay passing the test. Literature, kapag nag-search po kayo ng literature about assessment, marami po kayo makikitang questions about training college students just to pass the test. And we hope we get past that, because our society, we need people in the society that does not just get or consuming information, but rather developing information and questioning this information. Kaya po maraming naniniwala sa fake news. Kasi we have been training our students for a very long time to just consume knowledge. not to question the knowledge. So going back to the question, you're teaching anatomy. Now, my question is, what kind of skills, other than memorizing these facts, needed in your class so that they can be successful in their future profession? I hope you will answer they need critical thinking. So if they need critical thinking, it's just the basic question of definition of anatomy and physiology, parts of the body is the only assessment that you can give. No, the answer to that is just pencil and paper, no? Objective type of test. If that's okay with you, and hopefully it's not, then you can find case study as a good way to assess your student. A case study is that you have real situation that you will give to your students and asking them questions like spot the problem in this case. What kind of problem is this? What way to address this problem? How do you implement this problem? How do you plan to implement this problem? How you implement this problem and how you evaluate this implementation of your plan to address the problem. That alone is encompassing not just only declarative knowledge or the know-how, no, the content, but also functioning knowledge. So we have transcended already to just knowing what's the information to how they can be able to address this particular problem. So if you're teaching anatomy and any science classes, then a case study could be a good assessment for you.
All right. Thank you. I'll have one last question before we switch back to your presentation. This comes from Kent Batulan of the Cebu Technological University. Is it okay to plot assessment according to level of thinking? Say, quizzes target only knowledge level, major examination targets comprehension, analysis, and evaluation, and projects or tasks target application and creation.
Actually, you can target that in one assessment. Kaya meron po tayong table of specifications, di ba? Kung pencil and paper type of test tayo, let's say you have 50 item tests, that can actually handle all the levels of Bloom's taxonomy from understanding to creation. So my sense is that to answer this question is that maybe you're focusing more on the lower order thinking. That's why you're giving it like individual tests. So if you can just, we're talking about now the context of pencil and paper. Ang typical percentage of that, according to literature, is the ratio of 3:5:2. 30% are easy questions, meaning coming from the lower order thinking, understanding, comprehension, analysis. And then 50% of the total items must be average question. That would mean in the application level to evaluation level. And then higher difficulty questions, about 20% would be creation. So you can actually put it in one assessment if you will, if you want that. But the very basic ratio is that 3:5:2. So I don't see the point why you are segregating it, because if you can put it nicely and well thought of assessment or pencil and paper type assessment, that can be possible.
Okay, there are a lot more questions, but maybe we can respond to it later on, so we can continue with the presentation of the Harold. Go ahead, sir.
I remember, actually I don't remember, a colleague texted me, Joseph, thank you very much for reminding me. The title of John HIEd is Visible Learning. It's a very good book. If you can look at it online, it can help you figure out how to open or to open yourself into a visible visible to your students, meaning to say you're telling them what you're going to do in the class. It's visible to you, visible to them. So that's a good book. Okay, let's move to the context of online learning. I have been explaining to you principles of assessments, evaluation, and grading for a while now, and we want to know, how is it in the context of online learning? First, we need to understand what's your role as a faculty in online learning. Maybe you have seen this slide in the previous presentation, but what is it what's your role in an online learning class? You are an instructional designer, meaning to say, when you are in the classroom, face-to-face classroom, the instructional design is just one. You have a captured audience. That's an instructional design. You come to class, your students are waiting for you, you have captured audience, meaning to say the pacing of the students is highly determined by you as the faculty. If you say we will move to the next lesson, everyone will move to the next lesson. If you say we have a quiz today, you all have to take the quiz today. So that's design has been in the teaching and learning repertoire for decades and decades and decades. But if we move to online learning, what is now the instructional design? It's no longer linear because you don't have captured audience all the time. You know that there are different ways of communication. Synchrony can be synchronous, it can be asynchronous. So it's not all the time that you capture your audience. No? So how can you now design an instruction for the whole semester that includes, of course, your teaching, your facilitation, your assessment, in a way that you don't have captured audience? So we will talk about that in a while. You are a course facilitator. You're not there to just lecture the lesson to them. You cannot see them. The most that you can do is to make sure that they're doing their tasks, they're doing their assessment so that you can give proper feedback. You are an assessor, as you all know, and you are a mentor. Let me focus on what I'm talking about in terms of instructional design. You know, as mentioned a while ago, that in a face-to-face instruction, your students have no choice. They don't have a choice but to follow you in terms of pacing. You set the tone, you set the pacing, you set how fast you want, you set how slow you want. But in an online environment, there's what we call an online communication synchrony, the synchronous and asynchronous learning. Very, very quickly, but I use here Canvas because we've been using Canvas in FEU. But as I understand now, you're using Moodle, but it's the same. Synchronous learning is real time, where faculty and students meet on Canvas or any learning management system in Moodle, Google Classroom, Edu 2.0. Napakadami pong learning management system, no? On a specific time. You say 9 o'clock, we will meet, we will talk about, and you know this. So what are the features? You can use live chat, audio, video conferencing like what we're doing now. You can do timed quizzes. You can share multimedia presentations and online slideshows. Asynchronous learning is with self-paced, meaning to say that you let the student come up with their own schedule, understand the lesson on their own time, on their own pace. And the use of learning management system is highly important in this. No? You can use email, threaded discussion, announcement, file attachment. I think Richmond have already explained to you some of the features of Moodle. And there are a lot of asynchronous learning tools that Moodle can give you. FEU started with Moodle in 2011, if I'm not mistaken. We have been exploring Moodle for quite some time, up until we have leveled up to a particular point that we need a learning management system that will give us what we need. But Moodle is a very powerful tool as well. It can give you both the features of synchronous and asynchronous learning. Similarly, Google Classroom can give that also to you. Edu 2.0, as mentioned, there's so many learning management systems. Remember, it is important to take note that online learning does not intend to replicate face-to-face instruction. And asynchronous mode of communication has been advocated ever since. Because if you're doing online learning and you still meet them every time, then the idea of remote distance learning is already gone. No? The idea here of online learning has always have already been stated in so many literature that it advocates self-paced, asynchronous mode of communication. But while online learning advocates asynchronous learning, this may not be suitable for some students, especially for underperforming students, those who don't have internet connection, those who are in need of teachers' guidance. No? There are quite a number of students who need this. It is important for us, faculty, that we're aware that majority of students need more guidance in our class. Therefore, necessary to develop reinforcement modules is needed for both synchronous mode of learning and asynchronous mode of learning. For performing students, you can actually make them navigate the whole modules asynchronously kasi magagaling naman sila. But for the most part, a reinforcement module is necessary. What do I mean by that? In a face-to-face classroom, andito na po tayo sa point of face-to-face versus online learning. In a face-to-face instruction, your excellent students, sometimes they're bored because they know already what you're teaching. And you cannot move to the next because majority of your class, they cannot understand it yet, or they have not achieved specific learning outcomes yet. So most of you, the majority of your students will listen to you, but the excellent students, they feel, I already know this. But they cannot do something about it because the pacing is captured audience. They're sitting in your classroom, they're waiting for you to move to the next. But for online learning, this is a good opportunity to actually lessen your task in terms of the number of students. In my class, in my experience, there's about 10% of students who are excellent that they actually don't need my guidance. Give them the modules, give them the assessments, give them a specific schedule of time to answer the assessments. They will do it because they're autonomous, excellent students. They're independent students. About 80% of the students, they're average students, but they need my guidance. They need me to tell them, okay, this is the lesson, this is how you're going to look at it. About 80%. Then there's about 10% students who doesn't really care at all. They don't care whether they pass or they fail. In my experience, it's like that. I don't know your experience. So about 10% are excellent, autonomous, independent students. So I want to, to help them as well. So this is what I want to present to all of you. How do you develop an instructional design that's connected to student spacing? And what is an instructional design? I personally define instructional design as engineering an online class that will effectively achieve expected outcomes. Without pandemic, without online class, we are already instructional designers, but we only have basically one instructional design. Come to my class, I will lecture, I will give you a test. When you pass, move to the next level. But in an online learning environment, where we know, according to literature, that the age of the students is almost equal to their time in the screen. Let's say if your students are 20 years old, they're only as good as 20 minutes in front of the screen. If you have 30-year-olds, like a grad student, they can actually stay more than 30 minutes. But for students, let's say in elementary level, in high school level, for first year, their age is basically only the time that they can face in a screen. I'm not talking about the attention span. I'm talking about how they can be able to stay in the screen in terms of learning. So we need to address this issue. So in this talk, I wanted to highlight what we mean by instructional design. So this is where you prepare online teaching and learning materials that are well thought of in terms of your instructional design. Okay, so I want to focus on this. Here is my recommended instructional design for combined synchronous and asynchronous learning for all of you. We have been doing this. We are now doing this in FEU, and I want to share this with all of you, and hopefully it can help you in your respective schools, respective colleges, to figure out what a good instructional design on an online synchronous and asynchronous learning. This is an example of that. Let's say I've developed a module. Module 1, I have 3 topics there, and I have reading materials, I have threaded discussions, I have videos, I have file attachments, and I designed it to be asynchronous. I put it everything in Moodle. No? I put it in Moodle, okay? Module 1, reading materials are there. I have already planned the threaded discussion. I have questions there, and I will give an instruction to student to answer this. And here are the videos to supplement the reading materials so that you can understand it clearly. Like what we have presenting to you before the start of this session. One video is Samira Gu talk about peace education. There's a reading material that we give to our student, and there's a video that has been created by the Office of Ma'am Liz. And we put it together to supplement understanding of our student. So we put that in a learning management system. In your case, you're using Moodle. So we put that in Moodle, and this can be accessed by students any time of the week. So I will put it anytime within the week, meaning for students who are good and excellent, they can look at it, they can read it, and immediately they can answer formative assessments. They can do formative assessments already based on their understanding of the module. Okay, where am I here in this design? No? Sa in-explain ko po ngayon, nasan po ako ngayon bilang isang teacher sa klase na to? Wala pa po ako dyan. Because this is designed to be asynchronous. 1 week, those of you who can finish it earlier, it's up to you. The formative assessment is open. Formative assessment 2 is open. If you pass the formative assessments, the 2 formative assessments, if you pass, and that's good thing about learning management system, it can easily record the assessments, and you will be notified whether they pass or not. And Moodle can do that. So if you pass, immediately the new module will open for the students. No? The students who pass the formative assessment, the module 2 will open. Now, where am I in this formula? Wala pa rin po ako. No, wala pa rin po ako dyan. Nasaan po ako? If students failed in this formative assessment 1 and 2, module 2 will not open, but a reinforcement module will open that is similar to module 1. At I will be there to do synchronous discussion. Synchronous meaning I will meet them at 9 o'clock. If it's 9 o'clock stated in your class, or whatever time you want, I'll be there to explain the lesson. So I will do this video conferencing, I will do online conferencing with them, and I'll make sure that my students are there because it is synchronous. I will give them practice assessment. These are formative assessments which are not recorded because I know it's developmental. I want them to understand the content. I want them to understand the topic. I want them to get the competencies needed, so I will not record it. So we will do 1 week of reinforcement module, which I am there. Totok po ako bilang teacher. And then as soon as I know, mukhang okay na sila, I will now give them the formative assessment for this reinforcement module. Pag napasa na po nila yon, then it's the time that they can move to module 2. Now, ano pong nangyari doon sa mga hindi nakapunta sa reinforcement module? Ibig sabihin, nauuna na sila. You know? Hindi nila hinihintay yung mga classmates nila na hindi naintindihan yung lesson. Because pag hinintay pa nila, para pa rin siyang face-to-face classroom. Na-captured audience pa rin siya. That the students are still waiting there because their classmates are not yet ready to move to the next module. So I don't want to develop that kind of design in my online class. My design is that if you're good, if you can pass the assessments, which I will develop excellently, it's not just only content-based. Kasi pag content-based lang yan, they can actually go to Google. kung multiple choice lang yung assessments mo, they can go to Google, find the answer, open their books. And I wanted higher order thinking. No, this is the formative assessments. So if they pass that, I am sure that they have achieved the skills without me. So they have already moved to Module 2. And now, those students who are in Reinforcement Module 1, ngayon pa lang po sila mag-open sa Reinforcement Module, sa Module 2. What if for the second time around na nasa Reinforcement Module, nag-fail pa rin yung student? Let's say 80% of them, maybe 30% of them went to Reinforcement Module, kalahati po ng 15% failed. Hindi pa rin po siya makaka-move to Module 2. The student will be looped back to Reinforcement Module 1. Then I'm still there waiting for the student. Oh, what happened? What did you not understand in this assessment? Can I help you? Which of this? Or look, because your essay is like this, that's why you failed, etc., etc. And then the student will still move into this reinforcement module until the student will be able to pass the assessment. As soon as na-pass na po niya, they will now move to the next module. So let's move to number 2. Let's say ako po yung magaling na student. I don't need my teacher now as of the moment because I passed the assessments. I have already entered module 2. Andun na naman po yung content, reading materials, threaded discussion, videos, whatever you want in a synchronous, in a asynchronous lesson. So the student will still look at it, answer the assessment that you have done, and if they pass, they move to module 3. If they failed, then they look back to reinforcement module 2. So it goes on and on and on. That would mean it will lessen the number of your students who you will see in the synchronous session. Kung 40 students yan, the synchronous sessions that you will do, it's not always 40. No? So ngayon, what's now your role to the excellent students? Your role to the excellent students is just a guide on the side. You want to know whether they're progressing or not. You want to know what their progress is at the moment. So sabay, but it's not the same level of instruction. One is moving seamlessly. One is waiting for you in the reinforcement module because they need your guidance. They need your discussion, your lesson. They need to see you. They need to hear you. So this is a kind of instructional design that we can share with you. This is an instructional design that we are doing in FEU, and hopefully you can be able to do that in your respective classes, respective schools, so that you can be able to address issue of number of students. Kasi people are asking, some teachers are asking, oh, this is online learning. The typical 40 students should not be in my class. It should be lessened because there's more work. Actually, that's not true. Even if you have 50, and if you design your instruction, online instruction to be like this, you're not always meeting your students 50. You know, there will be times that you're probably meeting 10 students because students can thread seamlessly into the different modules. Okay, I hope that's clear. Now, we're now at this point. Can I go back here a little bit? Yes. When you look at the formative assessments, these formative assessments are what we call, or what I actually call, the touch points in your assessments. So the touch points are your assessments. Now, these questions can help you to work on your instructional design. For example, why do we need to assess, evaluate, and grade? If we're going back to what we have discussed in terms of principles a while ago, you will know that if you're looking at formative assessments, that's not important to grade, but it is important to assess and evaluate. But for summative assessment, grading is very important there. So this question is very essential for you to look into or to answer. Why does learning require assessment? You know, this question is it seems basic, but if you try to figure this out, it will entail quite a long discussion. Why does learning require assessment? Can they just learn? Of course they can. But you as the teacher, your role is to make sure that they have achieved the rigor, they have achieved the level of instruction that you want them to achieve or that requires in a specific discipline. Let's say in nursing, you have your own way of assessing students like revalida, return demo. In sciences, you have this moving exercises. In physical education, in architecture, you have different ways of leveling the expectations of your students. So this is an important question to answer. What kinds of assessment best honor and respect the learners? Since we're moving towards the student-centered learning, this is important. What kinds of assessments best honor and respect the learners? And the newer distance-related question, what kinds of assessment can measure learning activity that occurs in a distance? I guess this is where the next 30 minutes, hopefully you're still with me, we will figure this out, this question. What kind of assessment can measure learning activity that occurs at a distance? And can traditional forms of assessment ever serve as well? This is a tacit corollary question of whether what we have been doing in the face-to-face instruction, do they serve us well? You need to start asking that question. Ang mga ginawa ko po ba sa face-to-face instruction assessment, does it really help me in achieving expected learning outcome of my student? But in the succeeding slides, in the next maybe about 15 minutes, we will try to answer the kind of assessment that can measure learning activity that occurs at the distance. Remember, the principle of student-centered assessments stay the same even if we move from physical classroom to online learning. Kanina, I asked you in the first slide, what do you think would be your adjustment? And a lot of you have said technical, and that's good because the principles of student-centered assessment stay the same even if we move from physical classroom to online learning. We see student-centered learning assessment as activities designed primarily to foster student learning. Okay, here are some examples of SCL assessment activities. And these are actually in support of the principles that we have explained a while ago. For instance, multiple drafts of written work in which faculty provide constructive feedback. This is what I normally do. If you don't have time to do this, at least second round, 2 rounds of drafts of written work. You give them the first time to write an essay. Make sure you give them constructive feedback. It's not just only circling it. Huwag nyo lang pong guguhitan. It's a real feedback. You give them the feedback of the sentences, give the feedback of the content. Marami pong memes na lumalabas sa social media about giving feedback to the students. You just say, this work is trash. You know, may nakita po akong memes sa social media about that. If you give that as a feedback, how can that help your student? Or even without putting any words, you're just encircling it. How does it help your student to develop their skill? When we mark an essay, we just normally underline, encircle, and give a grade. The next question there is that going to help your student? If not, then maybe you should write proper feedbacking in your essays. Oral presentations by the students, this is also good. You can help your students to develop their confidence and the way they speak in front of an audience, even if it's face-to-face instruction. Students, even if it's not face-to-face instruction, I mean. Student evaluations of others' work. This is what we call peer. Group and team projects that produce the joint product related to the specified cello. This is my favorite, and I think you have done shared document activity previously, maybe the other day or the first day. What I do on shared documents, kasi sinasabi ng mga teacher, how can we do groupings in online instruction? You can actually use shared document, let's say Microsoft Word, may shared function po yan. I normally give a paragraph there, and I ask 5 students to edit that paragraph according to the instruction. So when they comment on it, I will see who commented on this, kasi may name na lumalabas. And then I ask them to rewrite the paragraph together. as a team. So one shared document, maybe 5 students in a group, that's a form of collaboration. That's a form of negotiation. Service learning assessments that require interaction with individuals, the community, or business industry. Even if on social media, even on online learning, you can do this. They don't need to go outside their house and go to the barangay or they're in the community. Social media is a very powerful tool to reach out the neighbors or reach out the barangay. We can still do service learning assignments. People are saying now on pandemic online learning, we're now very limited in terms of mobility. That's true. We're limited in mobility, but it opens more than just the neighboring community. It opens now to a larger audience. And we should take advantage of that. I'm very positive if you can see, because a lot of people are saying, no, just give an assessment to your students that they don't necessarily need to go out. Of course, because pandemic is very, we need to take care of our students. But I am so positive to say that we can still do service learning because it opens now more than just your community. It opens out to other people overseas. You can ask your students to send an email to this person, communicate to this person, communicate to this community via online. It's still a good opportunity for students to learn other than just memorizing information. So what do we normally assess? I think Ariel have already explained this, declarative knowledge, functioning knowledge a while ago, this morning. So I will just quickly going to discuss what do we normally assess. The declarative knowledge, as mentioned, this is the knowing that. It's the content. It also referred to the conceptual, propositional, or descriptive knowledge that describe things, events, or processes, their attributes, and their relations to each other. This means the ground of the functioning knowledge, which is the next one. This is what we mean by lower order thinking. This is knowing what the content is all about. Before you can join a debate online, you need to know the facts, you need to know the details, you need to know what happened. And even if it's a simple information that will help you develop your argument into a debate. Unfortunately, what's happening now on social media where people are jumping on issues that they don't know because the declarative knowledge have not been developed. People are just jumping ahead on information that they don't really know whether that's true or not. So what I'm trying to say is that we train our students, we train Filipino students to develop declarative knowledge so that they can use it for functioning knowledge. Functioning knowledge are knowing how they can apply it, how can they use it for argument, how can they use it in developing, in building. So using this content to decide and function as a good citizen of this country is very important. So these two have to be part and parcel of your assessment. You should think about assessing declarative knowledge and at the same time focusing on functioning knowledge. So how do we assess and grade declarative knowledge? Number one, typical declarative CELOs would include identify, describe, list, explain, argue, compare, and contrast. This has been explained to you by one of our speakers yesterday, Sir Angelo. He gave us how to write CELOs, or the course expected learning outcomes. If your CELO started with identify, describe, list, explain, argue, compare, and contrast, this is certainly declarative knowledge. In these, the student is required orally or in writing to say something about a topic or body of knowledge, not necessary to do anything with the topic. In the age of interdisciplinarity, this is something very good as well. There are two main formats of assessing and describing these CELOs. Questions that probe the student's knowledge base, to which students write extended prose in answer, or objective format, usually in the form of multiple choice questions. Okay. This is how do we assess and grade declarative knowledge. You can use Moodle to achieve this. the quiz feature of Moodle is very, very powerful, if I would say. Because now that we're transcending now the face-to-face instruction to online learning, what are the tools that you can do? Kasi these are just conceptual. Whatever we're talking a while ago are somewhat conceptual, but how can we now put it in application? So if you want to assess and grade declarative knowledge, make sure that you write your CELOs this way, and make sure you give them assessments that are objective format, usually in the form of MCQ. And how can you be able to use that or to concretize that? The use of quiz function in Moodle. You can use rubrics under the assignment feature of Moodle. I think it has been explained to you also by Richmond. The use of rubrics under the assignment feature in Moodle. And let me just read to you bullet number 2. It is through this feature that the students can take track of his or her progress while they write the paper. As an example, student A has the mindset to accomplish their paper with high grade in order for the student to attain the desired grade. The student relies on the rubric that they or the professor administered for the whole class. So you can use the quiz feature of Moodle, rubric under the assignment feature of Moodle. How about functioning knowledge? The functioning knowledge is more complicated than the declarative knowledge, as you know, because it's now moving to higher order. Assessment of functioning knowledge would focus on gathering information on students' performances on real-life professional context. Lalabas na po dito yung problem-based, which you're explaining to me, you're telling to me a while ago that you've been using. Problem-based, project-based, inquiry-based, discovery-based kind of learning. This information is very useful for you in assessing students' performances on real-life professional context. The one that I'm explaining a while ago about case study, this is a perfect example of how do we assess functioning knowledge of the students by the use of case study method or case study assessment. It would be assessing whether learning outcomes directly relating to professional theory, application, creative problem solving, lifelong learning, and being or have been achieved. Since the professional context is divergent in nature, assessment of functioning knowledge may be approached by students differently, but still within the real life context. According to Biggs and Tang, they said that open-ended as kind of assessment where students are free to structure their performances as they best see it. So now, if you're trying to look at this slide, it's really more of how the students will perform. So giving now the opportunity for students to become more creative, to become more independent, to become more autonomous. Now, you cannot jump in this immediately if you have not developed students' capability to understand declarative knowledge. You know, you have to look at that perspective as well. You cannot simply jump and say, okay, find a particular problem in your neighborhood. That find the particular problem in your neighborhood, you need a skill to spot on the problem in your neighborhood. It's not easy. You know, I've done an activity in my class before. I asked them to sit in the canteen. I asked them to write questions that come out to their mind while sitting in the canteen. And unfortunately, about half of them cannot even write a good question of what they want to ask while sitting in the canteen. Why do I do that? That's a good example of assessment or activity that will develop their intuition, their ability to ask questions within their neighborhood or within their nearby environs. So now I found out that, okay, some of my students cannot actually compose good questions. Then we started to talk about what is a good question, how to write a good question. So I did not record that. It's an information to me that half of my students cannot even write a good question. We're not answering the question. You know? Answering question is easier than it's expected. Writing question is more difficult. So I told them, don't think about how to answer the question. Eventually, we will find out how to answer that question, but how to write a good question is an important task for my students. So you can think about different ways of assessing your students so that it can help them develop the functioning knowledge throughout the whole semester. So what are the ways to assess functioning knowledge in terms of different methods or different strategies in assessment? You can actually do presentation or performance-based assessment, student presentation, online it can be, reflective journal. Reflective journal is my favorite. You're not just asking them to reflect on it. You want them to be reflexive. Reflexive is moving above reflection. Reflection is what do you feel about now. Being reflective is why do you feel what you're feeling it right now? Why do you feel what you're feeling right now? Magkaiba po yun. Kasi when you start to question, why am I feeling this way? You're beginning to go deep of your emotions. You're going more deeper than just stating what you feel. So this is a very difficult task of when you give it to your students, writing a reflective journal. Case study, as I've explained a while ago, portfolio assessment. Again, it's not just putting together what they have developed and putting together all their materials in one folder and that's it. It's not that. It's about reflecting on their progress. How can they know that they're progressing? Remember, sabi ni John HIEd, visible learning. It has to be visible to your students that they're learning, especially now that they're not seeing you. It's important that we develop that skill to our students, that they're more reflective more than ever. Capstone project, this is a summative assessment, typical to IT, typical to architecture, typical to engineering, typical to what else? Maybe math, BS math. You know, the capstone project is very typical to that. Video segments for communication, very important. Also for other students, no? Not just only for com students. Video segment is that you get a piece of, let's say, a minute of a video and ask them to ask questions about it or develop questions about it, develop problems about that particular video segment, and guided debate. Hindi lang po yung debate that they will just say what they want to say. It has to be guided debate. So how do we assess collaborative learning in an online environment? Group projects, activities in online learning environment also fosters cooperation, mutual respect between the learners. Likewise, it puts great emphasis on functioning knowledge through collaborative hands-on experiences of creative problem solving and group decision making. However, and I just like to emphasize here, online collaborative learning also experiences the same challenges of coordination and cooperation between members of group of students. Naalala nyo ba if you are asking your students to do group work, even if in face-to-face instruction, they will say, sorry sir, ma'am, may groupmate ako na hindi nagpa-participate. Even in online instruction, it will still be a problem. So make sure you clarify that to your class as early as possible. Okay, now this slide is a guide for us on how do we decide on the design of the assessment. I have given you a wide array of assessments to do in your online classes, but which of these can you use? How will you decide on the design of the assessment? I give you the 7 points that I have developed with a colleague, and this is coming from also a literature, but we tried our best to put it in a perspective of online learning. So first, you have to ask this question: what are the most important things that learners should know or do by the end of the course, by the end of the program, by the end of the topic, by the end of a course? First question. Because you cannot answer that. You cannot write your course expected learning outcome without answering this question. Second question, is knowledge created by students or should the master of knowledge given to them or by others? What do you mean by this? If you move to problem-based learning, should I give the problem to them or should I let the student figure out a problem or develop their own problem? Should I give the information to them, or should I let them find out information by themselves? For example, a novel. If you're teaching literature, a good problem-based learning here is like, here's a novel. I want you to figure out whether this novel can be created as a movie. That's a good task. Coming from a novel and deciding as a group whether this book or novel can be converted into a movie. Now, the students need to know what should be the components of a movie, assuming that they're not communication major. What should be the component of a good narrative in a movie? So this is a book, and here we are trying to problematize whether this book can be converted into a movie. So that's a good learning for your students. Question number 3, which is more important, collaborative learning or individual learning? Now, if you answer this, if you feel that this class needs, or this class or subject needs collaborative learning, then focus more on developing assessments that of collaborative in nature. 4th question, who should control learning? You as the teacher or the learner? This is a very important. Can it be both? Can it be controlled by both the teacher and the student? Is it only the teacher who will control it? Will you allow full control of the learning? Full control of the learning by the learners? Medyo questionable yun if it's full control. If you want to have a both control, should they have a say? Should they have a say in writing the course expected learning outcome? And that's what I normally do in my class. I have 6 or 5 expected learning outcomes. I reserve 1 for them. So I write 4, and 1 we will workshop it. What expected learning outcome you want to learn in this class? Also in the reading materials, sometimes I have 5 reading materials. I give them 3. That's the must read. And the 2, I ask the students to negotiate with each other what other reading materials you want to read in the class. So it's not just only controlled by me, but also there are decisions that has to be created by the student. Question number 5, is learning systematic or sequential? Is it linear to you, or is it holistic or idiosyncratic? Do you want it to not just focusing by chapter, or you want it to be holistic in terms of what I'm explaining a while ago, begin with the end in mind? You have a task for them that they need to accomplish for the whole semester, and then work backwards. Second to the last question, do we grasp learning aha? Kasi aha moment in online learning is more difficult, or you grow into it. The aha moment is directed by the teacher, actually. You lecture, you're like the magician. You're slowly unveiling information to your students. And then the students say, aha. Okay, that's an aha moment. But it's still highly controlled by the teacher. The aha will not come out until the teacher will slowly unveil it to the student. Or do you want the students to grow it? Give them a problem, ask them to find a problem, and then they will develop it on their own. Up to you for you to decide. And lastly, can learners be viably asked to demonstrate their learning immediately after the learning experience? And this is question about formative assessment. Is it immediately after the learning experience, or should they be given time to reflect on it? During a particular lesson, they have learned to it. Should they be given an opportunity to demonstrate immediately in whatever way to demonstrate it, or should it be given time for them to reflect? Decide, and it's for you to decide in terms of your designing assessment. How do you know whether the online assessment now is effective? We still go back to the questions. What are the outcomes to be assessed? If you're giving assessments, online assessments that are not going to help achieve the outcomes, then your efforts are futile, no? Because you're assessing students on expected outcomes that are not in the first place created. Okay, what are the capabilities or skills, whether it's implicit or explicit, in the outcomes? Is the method of assessment chosen in consonance with the outcomes and skills? Meaning, are they connecting? Because if not, then that's a big problem. Okay, Is the method of assessment chosen? Okay, time check, it's 3:03. I think this is my last few slides. Is the method relatively efficient in terms of student time and faculty time? Do you have more time to do it? Will your students have more time to do it? What alternative types of assessments are there? What are their advantages and disadvantages? Does the specific assessment task match the outcomes and skills? Are the marking schemes or criteria appropriate? We're just reviewing what we have discussed a while ago. Feedbacking. To benefit from feedback, students should, one, know the goal or standards being aimed for in the class, compare their performances with the goal and the standards. Standards are the expected learning outcomes. Take action to close the gap, make sense of the feedback, know what actions need to be taken so that the students can be able to address it in terms of your feedback. What makes a good feedback? Here are the questions that you can use, or here are the guidelines that you can use in giving a good feedback. Does the feedback relate to assessment criteria? Is it linked directly to a student's work? Is the feedback timely? Baka naman luma na. Is it understandable? Is it jargon-free? Can it be understood? Is how much feedback can you provide? Is it sufficient? And certainly should not be overwhelming. Does it include positive? Ito yung favorite nating lahat. Sandwich feedback. Is it positive and then negative and then positive? Does it clearly prioritize areas of improvement? Does it focus on actions points? What does the student need to do to improve next time? Okay, so that's the last of my presentation. And this is what I want you to do at home, maybe even after this session, for you to figure out what kind of assessment you can give to your students on your own online class. There are 4 columns here. I want you to write all your expected learning outcomes that you have written in your previous session, maybe 5 or 6 or 4 if you want. If you have only 4, it doesn't matter. Write on the first column. How will you assess each of the learning outcomes? Ask yourself, if this is a learning outcome that I've written in this class, how can I assess it? What kind of assessment that I need to use so that this expected learning outcome can be achieved? The third column will be what technology needed for my students to accomplish this assessment. Does it necessary to go to the library? If not, what kind of resources that they need to so that they can achieve this assessment in the process of developing this assessment? And lastly, what are the weights of each assessment? This will now give you the perspective of what to prioritize in terms of assessment. Again, do not give assessments that are not connected to your expected learning outcomes. The last column will help you rationalize which of the priority to be given for your expected learning outcomes. Maraming salamat, and I hope that you learned something from this presentation.
Thank you very much, Dean Harold Kolala. That last slide actually summarizes or synthesizes the whole session that we've had today. We may have gone a little bit over time. We would like to apologize, but as you can see, the sharing of Dr. Halala was very important. It's not enough that you write your learning outcomes or create your CIB, and you don't know how to go about it, how to measure the learning of your students. More so, as you said, we are all challenged because we are online, we do not see them. So how can we effectively engage them, and how do we effectively lead them towards really lifelong learning? All right, I will just entertain, I beg for your indulgence, let me entertain just 2 questions. Now do not leave, stay there for a while because I have announcements to make pertaining to your attendance this afternoon, the links for the evaluation, and the link for tomorrow. So stay on for a while. Let me ask this question, raise this question addressed by, raised by Rosemary Amparado of the Mindanao State University from Marawi. Is there something a senior faculty can do to help a junior faculty to refrain from giving harsh feedback to a student's output without bruising the colleague-to-colleague relationship?
You know, Ma'am Liz, we've been in the teaching profession for a very long time, and mentoring is very important. You know, I think we will all agree that for the senior faculty to be developmental also to the junior faculty, and I hope the junior faculty will accept that. You know, for our senior faculty, I still consider myself as a junior faculty. I still listen to the senior faculty in IE in my institute. No, in the Institute of Education, I think I'm the last who's considered the senior faculty. I've been there for quite some time, but I still listen to those who are in the teaching profession for a very long time. So please motivate them and make sure that we tell them that this kind of feedback is not going to help your students at all. Giving them harsh feedback cannot actually do good. Diba? So just mentor them.
Yeah, thank you. It's the right attitude. You should have the right attitude. If you're a junior faculty member, or even if you're a senior faculty member, we have to learn from each other.
Correct.
And we have to acknowledge that some people probably are low in empathy. So maybe because actually one of them asked about even assessing the affective domain. Allow me to raise just one more question, because all the other queries will be answered offline na lang, or much later on. And the last question comes from the Don Mariano Memorial in La Union. Anyway, from Annabel Buendia. What if a student was stuck on the first module until the end of the semester? Does that mean the computation of his or her grade is dependent solely on her performance from Module 1?
Oo, yan na yung problema if the students are staying in reinforcement module for a very long time. That means the student is not prepared for the class. That's why in college, we know that there's dropping, di ba? So we need to tell the students also to be responsible, and then they need to be reflective. If they're staying in reinforcement module for 3 months already, there's probably something wrong, no? Why are they not moving to the next module? In university level, unlike in basic education, you really need to make sure that they move, no? But in college level, even if you address it, and there are times that students are really lagging behind, it's also important for college students to be reflective. It's not only the teacher's role in terms of getting the learning. Actually, majority of getting the learning is really within them. So it is important that they should also be reflective. My answer to that is that the teacher can do the best that they can, and that's our sworn duty to this republic, this sworn duty to the country, that no one should be left behind. But it's also the two-way street, the responsibility of the student to do best about the module, making sure that they're studying well, so that the teacher and student can help each other. And I hope I answered that, Ma'am Liz. There's one more here.
Okay, go ahead.
Sir, can you give us a link of the template in Google Slide, maybe, so that we can just edit? Sure. Yes.
All right, okay. Anyway, time check is 3:12. So, Dean Harold, all the participants have expressed their gratitude to you and all the others presented today, Ariel and Richmond. In fact, all the other presenters we've had since day one, because they said they're learning a lot. It's reinforcing also a lot of like new knowledge, or they're enriching them further, okay? And so we hope you will stay on, all our participants, you stay on until the last day, because maybe it's like a graduated learning, actually. So thank you very much, Dean Harold. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon and for this initiative.
Maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat. Para po sa inyo, maging safe po tayong lahat, at naway matapos ang lahat ng to para tayo makabalik sa ating mga kanya-kanyang buhay. Thank you very much.
Kanya-kanyang classroom.
Correct.
Thank you once again. All right, ladies and gentlemen, please note on the screen right now, we have the announcements for your attendance this afternoon. Please check the link, as well as for the evaluation form. And for tomorrow, this is the link. Now, there are questions like, can we get copies of those presentations? All you have to do is go to the link that was sent to you this morning to be able to enter this module. And then, if you click it twice, it will lead you to the recording, okay? So even if you have not yet, let's say, if you have not found the recordings on Facebook pages of the Institute of Education, you can still access the video. Simply click again the link sent to you every time you join us, and then that leads you to the recording. All right, so we will cut the day. We will say goodbye for now, and we hope you'll be all fine. Ingat kayo, because the GCQ has already been enforced in Metro Manila, but Bulacan, Batangas and Laguna, and the MECQ has been lifted already. It's now GCQ. People are already taking the public transport, so there are more people out on the streets. I hope you stay safe and clean, okay? All right, ingat, bye-bye. I'll see you tomorrow. This is Lisa Banto on behalf of the organizers of this forum, Bayanihan project. Thank you so much.